Hello everyone. Welcome to the Research Data Management course run by the NHR Global Health Research Center for Non-Communicable Diseases and Environmental Change. This is the second session of the Module 4 on data quality, and I am Niveditha from the George Institute for Global Health. We will be running this session. So in the first session, we looked at what we meant by data quality and also certain factors which might impact the data quality. And in this session, we'll be discussing mainly about what we can, how do we go about developing a data review plan. So we are assuming at this stage that we have developed the data collection tool. We are clear about the mode, the way in which we are going to collect the data, which could be a paper data collection, electronic data capture, or are we going to do it face to face, or is it going to be a remote way of collecting the information? And the sources of data, that is, who will be contributing or generating the data. So using this information, you might have to reflect how any of these can affect the data quality in terms of completeness, accuracy of the data, and reliability as well as the authenticity. So let's take an example here. Let's assume that you're going to collect an information face to face by a self-administered tool, and you're going to collect it on a paper, and the source is a particular participant. Now, the likelihood for it to be incomplete is going to be less. The likelihood that it is going to be not authentic is going to be less. That's because you're collecting it face to face, you're collecting it on paper, and you're going to ensure that before the participant leaves, you're going to complete it. Look at it that the information is complete. Now, accuracy you can't ensure because there could be some elements in which you're capturing that probably may not reflect the truth. And there could be some information. If your tool is not good, then maybe the information which is coming in may not be reliable. So, given when compare it with another mode where you're going to send the questionnaire, the same questionnaire by postal method, or you're going to send it by some other method where the participant is going to complete it self-administered but not supervised. So the likelihood of it being incomplete is much higher, or maybe missing is much higher. The form itself may not be filled. So you need to be clear if it is how and when and who is going to collect the data. That will have a large impact. And this will help us to understand the overall risk of the project with respect to the data quality parameters. And this will also help us to decide on the mitigation strategies. It is possible, and in reality, every one of you are working on projects which has several small work packages. So each work package might involve various methods of data collection, and the settings might be also different. So when you work with this complex research project of that kind, it would be helpful for you to divide them into various work packages. It's possible that one work package you're going to collect information from the health system. It's going to be a semi-structured questionnaire. One package you're going to do is a survey, which is a household level household. You're going to visit the households and capture an electronic data capture. There could be one questionnaire where you are going to collect it, or a method of interviewing some of the health workers, and it might be using totally a qualitative method of questionnaire. So each one of it could be different work packages, or all the work packages. All of these could be one work package, and the next work package could be very different. So how you define your work package based on the time points of data collection or the people who are involved in generating the data, it is up to you. But it will help you to decide on the assessing the risk of each part of the work package or the different work packages. So this is something which typically is done as a team. You brainstorm, and it also requires that some of your team members are experienced enough to have collected or experienced in working in such conditions. So once you are done with the first step, now we need to think what could be the aspects which we can add in the management, of your study at the time of data collection. Be it any method, any form, you will, if you have a uh, multi-site study where you're going to involve several villages, where there are several staff members, maybe each staff member covers 3 or 4 villages, or you have multiple hospitals involved and very different staff involved with different hospitals, it is it is good if you can develop a manual, a simple manual which they can refer to. And such manuals are typically helpful when you have change in staff. Then it's much easier for you to ask them to go through this manual and understand, and of course top it up with the training. So manuals are helpful, but it doesn't mean that you just have a manual, it's sufficient enough to train. So a face-to-face training will really help, so that you can also, it can be a two-way communication so that the staff will be able to clarify the questions. So what is a manual? Are you going to develop a manual? If so, will there be a training? Who will be doing the training? Is it going to be done only one time point, or will there be refresher sessions? So these things you need to think about. Uh, Apart from this, you can also pair an experienced staff with an inexperienced staff. So typically in a field study, you'll have multiple field workers which you will be hiring for a short-term consultancy basis. Let's say that. And it is possible that you will have 1 or 2 field supervisors. It's possible that you have some field consultants who are senior enough, who are experienced, and some people who are very new to their job. So it's quite common that you pair an experienced and inexperienced staff for some time. You do they shadow, the inexperienced staff shadows the experienced staff, understands, learns the practicalities, and then they start collecting data independently. This is something which you can do while you're in your planning stage. If there are certain information which is extremely critical, it is also possible that you make the staff collect the information, but an experienced staff goes back and collects a small random section of a people to repeatedly they can go and ask the same question. It could be without overburdening the respondents and without impacting too much of the budget of the study. A random number would help. So let us say there are 10 villages, and in each of the 10 village there is one field staff which is collecting information. So the supervisor might randomly pick up 2 households from each of the village and go back and collect some of the critical information and check if there is any discrepancy. So if there are discrepancies which are, it could, and it's giving an example of 2 households, but it could be depending upon the size of the study. If you see that some particular villages there are many query errors, then it is possible that the staff is not doing their job properly, or they may need retraining. So you will have to figure out how you can improve, or you might have to recollect all the data for that particular village. So this is extremely important when the study is ongoing, that you will be able to do some remedial measures. And based on the what you see in terms of reviewing your data, maybe after entry, you might also want to think of retraining or refresher sessions. Or if there is a large turnover in the staff, you might want to take a refresher session, keeping the experience of what you have done so far in the field in that given context. So all these aspects about how you plan to ensure quality at the time of data collection is something which is important for all studies. So do think about it for your studies and see what you can do, and we can have this discussion during our live session. Now, third aspect which you can do. Now, whatever I'm saying, the first, second, third, and the fourth bullets which I've said, they're not mutually exclusive. Everything can be done in the same study, and so you might choose to remove and not include some of the elements, or you might choose different ways to do for different sets of data or work packages. So the third aspect is about identifying the critical variables of your study, which you should be doing very early on, and list them explicitly in a table. and then try to write down how would you verify the completeness for that particular variable. How will you do so how you assess completeness, how you assess accuracy, and how you assess reliability for each of those critical variables might be very different methodology. So you and someone else might be checking completeness, but someone else might be checking for accuracy. So these aspects are important for you to be very clear, especially for the critical variables. So in the coming slides, I will show you an example, a very small example of how you might want to do it in a table so that it is clear and it clearly documents how much you are giving importance to those variables and how you're going to do, who is going to do. Now, apart from irrespective of wherever you collect your data, be it paper or directly electronic, you will build an electronic database with certain inbuilt features. So this inbuilt features could help in assisting data quality. For example, completeness, logical. You can improve the logical plus nature of the data as well as the analyzability. Now, this is independent, you're doing paper or electronic data capture. Every data gets into the electronic system, especially the quantitative data, and you should be able to build in inbuilt features. So this part we discussed in length in the second module, where second session, where we discussed about what next after we develop the questionnaire. Now this questionnaire needs to become an electronic database. What is the role of the researcher in ensuring that you can add these inbuilt checks? So we looked at those elements, and it will be worth, if you can't recall, to go back to the session and look at it. So that is that's the connection between the module 2 and the aspect which I specify here about inbuilt features to improve data quality. Let us assume that you're purely doing a paper data collection for certain sections of your project. The way you're going to, so in paper data collection, you all must be knowing that the paper data is collected in paper and then entered into the electronic database. And the person who is collecting the data may or may not be the same person who is entering the data. So let us assume a situation where you have 10 or 15 field staff who are collecting the data, and then it comes to the field office. So somebody has to transfer the data into the electronic database. So to reduce the errors, some methods can be used. The first thing is pre-entry check. So this is a cumbersome activity wherein one particular person or a couple of people who are more senior in position or more experienced in position will check all the paper forms for manually for certain completeness. For example, does it identify does it give the unique identifier of the form? Does it have the key elements for you to first create a record in the database? Is it complete? Is there any ineligible text in this which the data entry person might not be able to do? So certain checks can be done, and these checks might become very useful in the beginning of the study so that if there are any problems, you can train the data collectors. It could be on a subsample, it could be on all the data. It again depends how you want to go about it. If there are any pre-entry checks, you might have to mention who will be doing it, how often will be they doing it, and how much will they be doing it. Now, let's say that when they do it, they see some errors. Would they correct it? Would they correct it, or would they flag it? And then the data, the field worker, will there be a communication between them? Will they go back to the field and collect the same information or correct it? The process of identifying the discrepancy is one part, but once you identify the discrepancy, how are you going to resolve the discrepancy and how are you going to document it in a paper is not as simple as in an electronic data capture, because you might strike through, but then you don't know who has corrected it. So documenting changes in a paper collection form should be thoughtfully made, and you should have some plan so that everybody follows those, and there is no scope that the data can be changed after it has been collected without a proper record. This is one way of ensuring quality can be checked. The second aspect is, because you're collecting in paper and transcribing it into the electronic system, there can be errors which can happen not at the time of collection but at the time of entry. So the best way to minimize double entry is the double data entry, where two different people are entering the data, or the same person enters the same data twice within the database. So there are many methods how you can do double data entry. You can have two junior staff entering and a third person correcting it, or it can be one junior staff entering and the second senior staff entering the data and correcting if there was any error at the same time. So double data entry is very beneficial if you have huge volumes of data which are all numerical in nature or coded in nature. It's not very helpful when you have too many texts or open-ended questions. So this can ensure quality of data efficiently when compared to single entry, where you make the data enter the data only once, but you recheck the entry against the paper form on a small subset. So it all depends upon the type of study, the total number of sample size, and the staff which you have. But ensuring paper data collection, data quality is a bit different from what you would do with the inbuilt checks within the electronic data capture. So when you build a paper data collection, when you have a paper data collection method and you build an electronic data capture system, you don't keep too many inbuilt checks if you're also going to do double data entry. So if you have a double data entry method, you don't have any inbuilt checks. You just enter it because when you match both the entries, any error will get picked up. But in a single data entry system, you will have multiple inbuilt checks. So the extent of checks depends, this needs to be thoughtfully done in any study. So this is about in paper data collection. So the next aspect of quality is about how do you make it analyzable. Most of the work is done at the time of building the database, but you need to ensure that you are having a database which will do the coding automatically. So if you see the first part, it's a pre-entry coding, where at the time of data collection, we are coding. For example, let us say you're asking about the occupation. So there are 15 choices for occupation, but each occupation is coded with a number. So now imagine that you mark the choice, but you haven't coded it against a number. So you might want to do it later before the data entry. Or it could be coded in the back end. You just have the choices and the program automatically does it for you. That's the most common method and the most efficient method. So we don't do any of those, the pre-entry coding or the post-entry coding is rarely done. So it's only the coding which is happening at the time of data entry in the back end is something which is most common. You also need to ensure, we discussed in length in the previous session, what problems dates can have. So you need to be careful about it and check it at the time of designing. You might have at the time of collection, you might realize people may not recall full dates. So what if we, let us say that a date of some particular information is important for you, but the patient participant does not remember the date. So in that case, you should have some conventions as to what would they enter if your date is missing. Most of the time, if the month and year is known, you put the first day of the month or the mid day of the month. So that convention should be part of your training plan. It's also possible that the month is not clear, so you might have to put, okay, if your month and date is not known, then we are going to put the mid-year uh, or the first month of the year. So there could be various conventions with respect to dates. When you have too many short text or long text, it is very difficult for you to ensure quality. So if those texts become a critical variable, then that's going to be a tricky way how you're going to ensure quality. So typically short text entries or long text entries are not critical variables, and they are more of a supportive information. You may not want to give too much of importance in terms of quality for those if they are not going to be critical. As I mentioned last time, if you have a repeated measurement, you have to ensure that you have proper IDs for everything, and you also will be ensuring that the data can be collected in long and wide format. So most information on this slide we have discussed in the previous session, but this will be good to remember that a quality of the data is not complete if you don't ensure analyzability. Uh, so this is one aspect uh, about the ensuring data quality at the time of data collection. So far, what we saw was about what can happen, what are the things which can improve data quality at the time of collection. Now, let's say what you can do after the data is being collected. So when we say after the data is being collected, you might want to check your data for discrepancies only if you know that you can go back and correct them by get it clarified from the source directly. If your study is in such a way that there is no way that you can correct the data after the data has been completed, entered, then this process will not have any value. So that's the reason many a times what we do is when we, let's say we have a study of 500 participants, you will check your data some way when you have collected partially, let us say 30 participants, and check if everything is fine quickly and go back and give a refresher training or see that there is an important problem. So while we don't expect too many changes, but if there is no way you can go get your queries corrected, then you will still have to check your quality of data in interim so that you can at least decide everything is happening fine at the collection level, and we don't have to check because the queries are not going to be resolved anyway. So queries can be raised, one, to understand the quality of the data. The errors, when we say queries, they may not be an error, they or may not be an error, but any errors which you pick up could be a metric for knowing how good the quality of the data is, or it could also be possible with the reason that you want to correct those errors by verifying it from the source. So yeah, let us assume a situation where you can correct your data by verifying. So you can pick up queries within the electronic data capture system. And once you pick up the queries within the system, you at the time of data collection, it can raise automatic queries at the time of collection. So most queries get resolved at the same time because it's popping up a message for you. It is also possible that after the data is submitted, you are checking it manually. So let's say there are some complex things which you want to check about certain aspects which needs manually looking people, are trained people to look at. That is also possible for you to raise queries. The third aspect where we can raise queries is you've submitted the data, but you run the queries within the electronic data capture system, but you run a programmatic queries using certain programmatic languages, and it is not written at the time of raising the queries, but it is pre-written. And then all the field supervisor has to do is click on a button and it will tell if it is valid or not. So this is very helpful where you are very sure that these queries can be clarified from the field staff. But what is needed is, what will you do after you raise the query? Who is responsible for this? How will you do it? So all this needs to be clarified in your manual. You can also take the data outside the system and take it through a statistical software and monitor the data for example, you can check what is the percentage of missing across all the variables. It's very easy to dig out, get this number of how much percentage of missing values the data is missing, irrespective they are critical or non-critical. It doesn't take much effort at all, and you can discuss in your team meetings, okay, this is missing and this is missing only in some sites, and this particular variable is missing across all sites. This will help you to think and get to practical solutions. You can also run several if and then logic checks, which are quite complex to build in the EDC system, but it's quite easy to build in a statistical system. And you can also look at patterns. As I discussed last time, if you have multiple sites, you can look at data patterns. And all these information can be done centrally by one data manager or a data analyst. And that's why it's called a central data monitoring. It's not done at the field level. You might want to write in your review plan what software you will be using and where will it happen. Will it, in the sense, in where it will happen, in the sense, will it happen in a server space, or will it happen on a computer, because data is moving out of the electronic data capture. You should be worried about the data security and confidentiality, and that's the reason where it will happen is important. You might also want to make a list of checks that will be made during data routines. Assume that you are doing a series of checks and you get a quality report, but you don't know what is being checked. You don't have a list, and you have a person who is changed and you don't know what checking was done before. So it's always good to have a list of checks which is being made during data routines, which can be updated routinely. As I mentioned before, you can have statistical tests to test for data quality, uh, uh, or you don't need to, you can just look at data patterns without any statistical tests. And these typical statistical tests will need statisticians' help, and they need to be interpreted cautiously as well. So for this particular part, it is important that even if the queries are raised, they need to be checked for its meaning. So the data management team and the statistical team, when they work, they have to share it with the research team. They have to interpret it and decide on the next future steps. So this is about checking the data outside the electronic data capture environment. Now, let me summarize this. So the first step is what to collect, how to collect, etc. So once we decide what to collect and from where, we are also deciding, okay, we either can have a paper collection or an electronic data capture collection. Irrespective of the mode of data collection, training is important. Training the staff who are involved in managing this data collection process is important. You might, if it is a paper form, you have a chance to do a post-collection manual check, which I mentioned. But you may skip this, you may not do this, or you might do this check only on a small portion of the population, which is a subset of the population. You might want to do a repeat check. You might choose a double data entry, or you might choose a single data entry with post-entry checks. And so in an electronic data capture, typically it is always single data entry and training is needed. Irrespective of it is paper or electronic data capture, once the data is entered, you can always develop ways to check your data quality post data entry, either within the database or within an external to database, which is in a statistical environment. So think about how you can do this uh, in your particular study. Now, the aim is the data should be analyzable. The data completeness and logic should be checked. And you can see analyzable is something which happens in the very early when you're designing a database. Completeness and logic can be done in multiple ways. And the next is you want to check for accuracy of your data, which you can only check if you can go back to the source and get it measured again, or you have a real source from where you can check. So otherwise you can't confirm for accuracy of the data. Now, what do you do after so now how do we summarize it in a small path? So this diagram, I've just taken an example here. Let us say the data is being collected from study sites. You are entering it into a data. We're not bothering is it done in paper or etc, but it is being entered. And you have automatic queries which are generated by the database. And these are called programmatic checks. So you can see a double arrow between the automatic checks and the data collected from the sites. This is a double arrow because the correction happens immediately. Now the other way is that is one way of ensuring data quality. The second one is manually somebody is checking the data. Some expert is checking the data either with the source or they just eyeballing the data, and they can manually raise queries within the database. The third, that is most time consuming, and it should be restricted only to very certain aspects. For example, I'm more abreast to the clinical trials. In the clinical trials, what we do, adverse event data is something we check with the source and we check it manually to pick up some errors. But we don't do for the rest. So we believe more on the automatic checks for many of them. The third method, which is most efficient, but it is you need some skilled people to do it, is central monitoring. As I said, you can take the data outside the software and electronic data capture and use a software to look at completeness, patterns, and logic checks. So if you can see, there are three different ways we have done. But then any way you do, you should give periodic reports to the project management team. So the central monitoring, even if you do, you have to give periodic reports to the management team so that you can update your strategy of central monitoring, or they get a feedback of how the data is looking at. So a collated data will give very different information than looking at individual forms. And that is why central monitoring is very powerful. The once we look at the periodic reports by the project management team, they might decide, okay, we'll continue to do what we are doing, which is going fine, or we do a retraining, or probably we might have to revisit the mitigation plan because some things are not working. And we go back again, check if there are certain fields which were problematic, then probably we go back and give thorough check for those fields again through some manner. So this is a quick summary of how you might want to implement it in real life. So I also mentioned about a table which you can have, especially when you plan, when you have a list of critical variables. So I have an example, blood pressure, and for my study, let's say it is a critical variable, and I will have to write what is it I want to do. I want to check for its completeness. I want to check for its completeness by just running it through the software to say what is the percentage of missing values there, or it is possible that I will make it a mandatory field. It could be any way that I'll have to write there. But who does it? So here I've said there is a paper form. We are going to check for manually, and the field supervisor will do. We'll also run post entry checks, and we will be sharing it as a weekly report. And I am also saying, because it's a critical variable, I want to do a digit preference, which means I want to see if there is any pattern in the way the first and the last digit is presenting. Take an example for blood pressure. You don't expect the last digit to be always 0 or always 1. So you expect the blood pressure, if it's measured in electronic measurement, it should be between 0 to 9 with a randomly. So digit preference can be a central monitoring method which you can do. And here I'm saying the data analyst will do. I'm going to use a R program, and I'll share this as a monthly report. So you can see every element is written here in a simple table which can be implemented by the project team. But why we should do, how we should do, should be decided as all the members in the team should be contributing to this. Let's take another example, which is a binary variable. Was there hospitalization or not? And and this is going to be a critical variable, let's say, for my study. So I would say the method of check for accuracy would be source data, and with source data I'll be able to get an accurate entry. And who will do it? A field data collector will do it at the time of data collection itself. And how will they do it? They look at the hospitalization record. And when will they do it? At the time of data collection. So here the person who is ensuring quality is the collector themselves. Then we have we also say, okay, I'm not satisfied with just this method. I'm also going to make the supervisor to revisit the home and re-ask the same question, and probably I'll do it in a quarterly basis on a subsample. So let's say we have third variable, which is smoking, and it's not a critical variable, but I can always check for completeness, and the data analyst will do, and it goes into the monthly report. So you can see what all goes into a monthly report, what goes into a quarterly report, and what goes in a weekly report. This all is, there is no hard and fast rule, but it all depends about which is important for our study, our resources, and the team's ability. Now, as I mentioned, you have to always share a periodic report of quality for brainstorming for internal purpose. It need not be for funder might not have asked, your ethics committee will not ask, nor your it may not be needed, but it is needed for internal purposes for quality control. So it is good to this part of what will be reported. You can start with a template and it can grow organically. What will be reported? Who will prepare the report? How frequently will you make the report? And what is the mechanism to governance? Sorry, what is the governance mechanism to monitor data? So you will monitor the data, but who will check it? Who will make decisions? And is there any flags if we raise what to do? Who will take a major decisions? So in large studies, it's very typical that when during your steering committee meetings, you're also asked to present your quality report with respect to missingness of critical variables. Is there any other measures which you're doing for quality control, and brainstorm with the steering committee members so that they can advise or they can discuss about any major changes which need to be done in the study. So periodic reporting, looking at quality, analyzing the quality and sharing it to the core team to update as well as to get advice is something which is a part of the review plan. Uh, as I mentioned before, query is something which you raise. That discrepancy may or may not be an error. So it could be raised by automatic queries, it could be raised by post-entry manual queries, or it could be done during source data verification. However the queries are raised, they will have to be assigned to the person. So some electronic systems will allow you to assign to a person and they can resolve it. And once they resolve, they can submit it back. And it is also possible that it goes back to the manager who raised the query and they can close it. So this is called a workflow. This query workflow changes by the database we are choosing. You may want to have this workflow, you may want to have a different workflow, but this is important for you to have clarity who raises the query, who corrects it, and who closes the query. Closing query means if you're satisfied with the response, you close the query. If you're not satisfied, you send it back. If it's not resolvable, you close it, though it is not resolved. So this is called a query workflow, and this can be very different for each study based on which database you use and how complicated you want to make the workflow. My advice is to keep the workflow simple and ensure that but you ensure documenting any changes which happened after data entry. So the summary here is a data review plan is a dynamic document, but start your project with some plan. Project manager is responsible, but you take support of the data manager and statistics team as per your data review plan requirements. This is a great way of learning to look at your own data and update your strategy to ensure the quality of your data. So this particular session is mainly meant for you to think about your study in these angles, and probably there could be many more aspects that you can think of and start putting them as bullets. A simple workflow diagram with a table should be more than enough for a data review plan. You don't have to write several pages, but it's about clarity of thinking, who will do what, when, why, and how. So with this, I'll end the session. Thank you very much.